Write the vision. It started with a restlessness he couldn't explain. Not a storm outside. Not footsteps in the hallway. But something, inside. At first, he thought it was just another night. Toss. Turn. Silence. But at exactly 3:17 a.m., something woke him again. No alarm. No sound. Just an ache behind his chest and a weight in his hands, as if he'd forgotten to carry something he was supposed to remember. He sat up. Blinked twice. Reached for the notebook beside his bed, the one that had remained closed for months. Dust on the cover. Pages untouched. And yet, it called to him. Not in a voice. But in a pull. A pull stronger than logic. Stronger than sleep. He opened it. Blank. Nothing written. That's when the thought hit him, quiet at first. What if the reason you feel stuck is because you haven't written down what's been placed inside you? He paused. Something in the air had changed. This wasn't about scribbling ideas. This was about obedience. Something had been entrusted to him, and all heaven was waiting to see if he'd do the one thing that separated the dreamers from the doers. Right. That's when the whisper returned. The same whisper that echoed from ancient pages, long before his time. Write the vision. Make it plain. But this time. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. He sat there, staring at the page. Blank, but heavy. As if it already knew what belonged there. See, we were never taught this in school. No one told us that writing wasn't just about remembering. It was about releasing. There are things inside you right now that were never meant to stay locked in your chest. They weren't made to swim endlessly in your thoughts, circling every night like they had no place to land. They were meant to be written. The vision isn't yours to carry, it's yours to deliver. But what happens when the delivery is delayed? When the pen stays capped? When the journal stays closed, for years? Some call it procrastination. Some call it fear. But at its core, it's disobedience. And you feel the weight of that even when you can't name it. You walk around wondering why nothing's moving. Why doors stay shut. Why progress feels distant. But what if you've been entrusted with instructions? And your next season is waiting on your first sentence? That's the part nobody tells you. The vision is voice activated, but it moves when it's written. Some of the greatest answers you've prayed for are already in you. But they're sealed inside unwritten pages. We've lost the discipline of the scroll. Lost the urgency of the ink. And in exchange, we've filled our lives with distraction, always saying, I'll write it down later. But later is a thief. Later steals clarity. Later buries calling. And later has robbed more people of their future than failure ever did. The page is still blank. But it's waiting. And deep down, you know exactly what belongs there. The pen is small. Harmless, or so it seems. But in your hands, it becomes a mirror. And that's where the fear begins. Because once you write it down, it's real. You can't unsee it. You can't unknow it. You can't hide behind the excuse of, maybe it wasn't meant for me. The moment ink hits paper, accountability begins. That's why people hesitate. That's why they fidget. That's why they'll watch 10 videos, read 5 books, go to 3 conferences, before they write one honest sentence. Because deep down, they're not afraid of failure. They're afraid of clarity. Clarity demands movement. And once you see it in front of you, once the vision has shape, once the calling has handwriting, you are no longer confused. You're confronted. The pen doesn't just expose the plan. It exposes you. It shows you how long you've delayed. It reveals what you've known all along but kept pushing aside. And more than anything, it threatens your comfort. Because comfort says, keep it all in your head. Dream big. Talk often. Move, later. But the pen says, now. Right here. Put it down. And that moment, the one where the vision stares back at you in black and white, is the moment everything changes. Some run from it. But the ones who don't, they become dangerous. Not to others. To limitation. Because nothing fights back harder than a person who finally sees what they were born to do, and isn't afraid to write it out loud. He didn't plan for it. He didn't ask for the moment to find him the way it did. No lights flickered. No voices filled the room. Just stillness. And yet, something shifted. There are moments that don't feel loud, but they echo for the rest of your life. That was his moment. Pen in hand, page half written. No applause. No spotlight. Just a sentence. Then another. Then a phrase he didn't even remember thinking, almost like it had been waiting for him to show up so it could finally come out. This wasn't inspiration. It was confrontation. He realized, in that quiet room, the vision wasn't about him. It never had been. The burden he carried wasn't a punishment. It was a baton. And someone, somewhere, was waiting to run, only he hadn't passed it yet. That's when the clarity struck. The reason he felt the pressure. The reason the night stayed long, and the peace never settled. Was because heaven had already sent the assignment. But the delivery had stalled. Not because of delay in design. But because of delay in obedience. The revelation wasn't loud. It was surgical. It cut away the excuses. It removed the stories he told himself about needing more time, more tools, more proof. And it left him with one truth. If you don't write it, it dies with you. And that death, it's not just yours. It's the books that won't be read. The business that won't be built. The person who won't be healed because your vision stayed buried. It was never just about you. And now, you can't unknow that. That was his revelation. And maybe it's yours too. You've been carrying it too long. And you know it. You've smiled through it. Clapped for others while it pulled on your ribs from the inside. You've told yourself it wasn't the right time, that maybe it would go away, that maybe someone else would step up. But it hasn't gone away. Because it was never meant to leave you. It was meant to leave through you. The dream. The burden. The vision that shows up in the quiet and haunts you in the noise. You've prayed for clarity, but what if clarity isn't the problem? What if the real issue is weight? The kind of weight that doesn't sit on your shoulders but under your ribs. The kind of weight that doesn't make you stumble on the outside, but makes your spirit tired. You weren't built to carry it forever. You were built to release it. And every time you delay, the pressure grows. Not because you're weak. But because the message is getting heavier. Time is passing. People are waiting. And whether you acknowledge it or not, there is a cost to delay. You feel it in your restlessness. In the way your wins don't satisfy. In the way your soul aches even when your life looks full. You've been carrying it too long. And deep down, you know. You weren't meant to die full. You were meant to empty it. Fully. Boldly. Written. When you write, things shift. Not outside. Inside. The room doesn't change. The air doesn't tremble. But something in you does. Because writing is not just about language. It's alignment. When the hand starts moving, something ancient begins to respond. You start unlocking doors you didn't know were shut. And behind those doors, there are things you buried. Things you postponed. Pieces of yourself you said you'd return to later, but never did. Writing brings them all back. Not to haunt you, but to heal you. And as you write, you start seeing patterns. Decisions you made out of fear. Delays that weren't about timing, but about permission. Moments when you could have stepped forward, but instead, shrank. The page does not lie. And once you face it, you change. Not gradually. Immediately. Maybe not everything around you. But you. Because when you write the vision, you give language to what has only been weight. You give identity to what's only been pressure. You start seeing with new eyes. And with that clarity comes authority. You stop begging for validation. You stop chasing applause. You stop waiting for signs. Because the moment the vision becomes written, it becomes real. And real vision carries its own momentum. That's when the shift happens. When you write, heaven recognizes movement. When you write, the fog starts to lift. When you write, the future begins to respond. Because what was once trapped inside you has now been set in motion. How do you write it? Let me tell you. It's not about perfect grammar. It's not about polished sentences or sounding impressive. That's not what this is. This is not an audition. It's an extraction. You write it by sitting still long enough to hear what your soul's been whispering for years. You write it by refusing to judge your first sentence. By ignoring the voice that says, "Who do you think you are?" You write it raw. Unfiltered. Broken, if it has to be. You let it bleed before it shines. Because the page doesn't need polish, it needs presence. You don't wait for inspiration. You show up and demand honesty. That's how you write it. You take the fragments you've carried for years and lay them down like bricks. One sentence at a time. Even if your hand trembles. Even if your heart races. Even if the words feel too small to carry what you feel. Write anyway. Don't write for applause. Write because silence has become too loud. Write because if you don't, the weight will keep growing. This isn't about being a writer. It's about being obedient. The vision was given to you. Not your neighbor. Not your mentor. You. So start where you are. On a napkin. On your phone. In the dark. At 2 a.m. Scribble. Type. Mumble into a recorder. But get it out. Because you're not writing to impress. You're writing to release. That's how you write it. You start. Now it's your move. Not tomorrow. Not when it's convenient. Now. You've listened long enough. You've nodded. You've agreed. But agreement is cheap. Action is costly. The vision will not write itself. It will not beg. It will not sit at your feet forever. There comes a point where delay becomes disobedience. And that point is now. So here's the challenge. Before the sun sets, before the excuses come knocking, before comfort calls you back to silence. Write. One line. One sentence. One truth. Put it on paper. And watch what happens when your obedience unlocks momentum. You don't need to understand it all. You just need to move. Because vision isn't meant to stay in your chest. It's meant to move through your pen. Into the earth. And change things. You asked for confirmation. This is it. You asked for a sign. Here it is. And you asked what to do next. I'm telling you. Write the vision. Make it plain. And don't stop until the world can read what you once only saw in secret.